His contemporaries cold-shouldered his works. Even Voltaire, the first translator of Paradise Lost, gave a negative response to it. But John Milton himself, the greatest of poets of the 17th century, used to say, "I am happy to have few readers if only they are worthy of understanding me." John Milton was born in 1608 in London, into the family of a successful lawyer. John was an unusual boy. Games did not attract him so much as composition of verses. On graduation from Cambridge, in order to receive the degree of Master of Arts, Milton had to take holy orders. But after a long consideration, the 24-year-old John refused to be drawn to priesthood. He spent the following 6 years in his father's estate, where he was engaged in self-education and composed verses. In 1638, Milton set out to travel all over Europe. In Italy, he visited Galileo, who was under home arrest by the order of the Papal Inquisition. The Revolution and the Civil War that broke out in England made Milton return hastily to his motherland. He decided that he had to serve the revolution with his pen and took up publicism. His first pamphlets were devoted to religion. "I am writing not for elegant and learned reader," said Milton, "but to justify the ways of God." At age 33, Milton married Mary Powell, who was only 16. But the revolution interfered with the writer's private life. A month after the marriage, the new Mrs. Milton, who did not share the rebellious spirit of her husband, asked him for permission to make a short visit to her parents. She returned home to her husband only 3 years after. Later in his treatises on family life, Milton advocated the necessity of divorce under the absence of spiritual links between spouses. For this, he was accused of immorality and given the nickname divorcer. At the age of 37, Milton withdrew from public duties and started gathering materials for the history of Britain. But the 4-year-long period of asceticism was broken in January 1649, when King Charles I was publicly executed in London. Milton published a pamphlet, The Tenure of Kings and Magistrates, and soon after that he was appointed as Secretary of Diplomatic Correspondence at the State Council of the Republic. The publicist faced a challenge to change the public opinion of the neighboring countries, which after the execution of the anointed sovereign divine Charles I, regarded England as a monster of vice. In response to the violent attacks from abroad, Milton wrote a Latin treatise, The Defense of the People of England, which won him fame all over Europe. But from that time on, the 40-year-old Milton had to dictate his works to his secretaries. His eyesight deteriorated drastically. Misfortunes followed him in the following decades. His wife died, as well did his 1-year-old son. John married a second time, but again became a widower in a year and a half. To cap it all, in February 1652, Milton became completely blind. The coronation of Charles II, the son of the executed king, was catastrophic for Milton. In 1660, an executor burnt his pamphlets in the square, and the 52-year-old poet was put in prison. Only his infirmity and the petition submitted by his friends set him free a month later, on the condition of paying a significant fine of £150 sterling. The house in London, the only property belonging to him, was destroyed during the fire. And after the liquidation of the bank in which Milton had invested his money, Milton lost his last savings. The restoration of monarchy not only deprived the poet of his position, earnings, and opportunities of political activities. It was only recently that, through pamphlets known all over Europe, Milton had declared the right of the people to kill tyrants and protected the Republican government. Now, the blind man, harmless for the government, spent the last days of his life in isolation and poverty. Newspapermen jeered at the servant of the Republic who was punished by God with blindness. They took visiting foreigners to stare at the disgraced celebrity. But Milton did not run into despair. Being distanced from politics gave him a chance to reconsider the past. 20 years had passed since the English Revolution, and 10 years since the execution of the king and the crash of the Republic. Striving to find the causes of the crash of the Republic, Milton came to a very simple conclusion. People were to blame for the crash of the Revolution as they failed to reach the goals set. The poet tries to understand the reason of the tragic imperfection of man and appeals to the theme of struggle of Satan against God. In this heroic epos, The Paradise Lost, Milton, using a biblical story of the fallen angel Lucifer, rethought the events which he had witnessed and had taken part in. 4 years later, his poem Paradise Regained and drama Samson Agonistes were published. During the last year of his life, Milton was bedridden and found consolation in music and books which were read to him by his relatives. John Milton passed away in 1674. He was the first among English poets who declared literature to be not a craft and entertainment, but a service to a duty. He called to diligence and patience, and then, according to him, from shadowy types to truth, from flesh to spirit, from imposition of strict laws to free acceptance of large grace, from servile fear to filial, works of law to works of faith.